Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Monday's edition, and we're broadcasting from chilly Irvine, California. Happy to have you with us today. And for all of you football aficionados, college football, well, you've got your Final Four all set now. You've got the Georgia Bulldogs, the Ohio State Buckeyes, the Michigan Wolverines, and the TCU Horned Frogs playing. So it should be an exciting starting, I think it's December 31st, and we'll have a national championship. University of Alabama not included this year. So college football, what a great weekend. All right, now let's get down to some business here of what's going on here. The question raging over Wall Street right now is the U.S. headed for a recession? Well, judging by how the stocks are selling off today, with the Dow down about 500 points, the NASDAQ down a couple hundred, the S&P now down approximately just under 100, you've got some issues out there. Now, while at the same time we have rising interest rates, some of this stuff is not making any sense to us. I mean, as an example, you don't have recessions when you create 263,000 jobs, which is what we added in the month of November. That was a really good jobs report that came out on Friday. The unemployment rate stood steady at 3.7%. And I had a chance to catch Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan over the weekend. Basically, his message was this: wage growth has to slow, or we have a risk of what's called a wage price spiral. And let me explain that to you, what that is. When you have constantly rising inflation, of which wages make up a decent part of the index, as inflation ticks up higher and higher, you have a tendency to want to push your wages up to make sure your wages stay up with inflation. That's called a wage price spiral. And the risk is, if it gets out of control, you can have inflation running out of control. That could be a real problem. But what Wall Street is looking at, they're saying, well, wait a minute. We had thought that the Federal Reserve would raise interest rates up. They'd be able to peak somewhere around 4.5% to 5%, and then stay there a little while, then start going down. Well, the stay there for a little while doesn't seem to be the prevailing mode anymore, because the Federal Reserve has consistently come out and said, once we reach a level that we're comfortable with, which is probably closer to 5 than 4.5, but let's just sort of split the baby and call it 4 3/4. They're not going to turn around and then start cutting interest rates like a lot of people on Wall Street were looking for. No, these rates are likely to stay higher for longer, and that's like kryptonite, particularly to growth stock investors. So we saw a little bit of it on Friday, and we're seeing more of it today, where there's a follow-through to some of the selling. So it's a mixed bag, folks. I mean, again, as Moynihan said, you don't have recessions when you create 250,000 jobs in a month. You typically don't have a recession when your unemployment rate's under 4%. Now, there is still tight demand for labor. So we'll see, how this plays out. But with interest rates ticking up, oil prices tend to come down a little bit. Now, why is that significant? Well, oil has come down considerably. It's now trading in $75, $80 a barrel range. It's not trading up near 100 or north of there where it was earlier this year. Now, OPEC is continuing to maintain supply where it is. But an interesting thing developed over the weekend. The European Union agreed to cap the price it's willing to pay for Russian oil at $60 a barrel. Well, guess what? They get about 1.5 million barrels a day from Russia. Well, Russia says it's not going to export oil to them anymore at those prices. So the question is, where are you going to make that up from? So some could come from the U.S., some could come from the Middle East, other potential sources, but right now that could create a problem for the Europeans, who already have a problem with high prices over in Europe, particularly on natural gas, very high over there. So if oil prices ease, that takes less pressure off inflation, but if wage prices go up, it can put additional pressure on it. So this is going to have to be watched very closely. You've heard stories about a lot of the technology companies in Silicon Valley, cutting growth. You've heard it from the Facebooks, you've heard it from Amazon, from Google. Some of the other money-losing tech companies have announced it too. But up until now, it hasn't gone to Wall Street. Well, that changed also over the weekend, folks. Wall Street banks has said they're going to cut bonus pools by up to 30%. That's a precursor to being concerned about a recession. Because Wall Street had a pretty good year this year, despite the fact that the markets were down on the year. Dow Jones down about 10%, the S&P 500 down closer to 23-24%. Now, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, widely respected dean of the business school at Harvard, said he expects a sharp downturn in the economy in 2023. I have news for you. Larry Summers has been right about a lot of stuff lately. And he warned Democrats about those big spending bills that they did that was going to cause inflation. He's been right on a lot of stuff. We don't always agree with him, but you have to respect his accuracy. And again, he comes with the credentials to be respected. So Summers is saying there could be a sharp downturn in the economy in 2023. Well, again, all these storm clouds brewing, but on the surface, you're still continuing to see consumers spend. There was a lot of money doled out by the government in 2020 and 2021 to, quote, fight COVID. And a lot of that money got saved. A lot of consumers continue to spend, but a lot of them had pretty good balances in their checking accounts. Where that's not moving forward is people who are spending beyond their means, putting necessities on credit cards. That is a problem. Because if you're spending beyond what you take in and you're building up your credit card balances, those credit card interest rates are extremely high. So the economy, mixed bag right now. But again, when you have sub 4% unemployment and you have wages rising, folks, that is not a recession. And a lot of people on Wall Street, some are saying, well, we're going to have a soft landing in 2023. Well, Larry Summers, it could be a significant downturn. Others are saying there's not going to be any soft landing or hard landing. This economy is going to continue to grow. So there's really three camps. Which way is it going to play out? We'll have to see. That's why this crystal ball is really important as we talk through some of these things. All right, let me shift away from the economy just a minute. Let's talk a little politics here. The Democratic Party, and I think they did something really smart here. You've heard me, respectfully say they've done some good things when they have, but the Democrat decision led by President Biden, White House, the move to make South Carolina the first voting primary state replacing Iowa, let me tell you what that's all about. It's all about payback to Jim Clyburn for supporting Joe Biden to help him win the nomination in 2020. Think back, folks, when the Democrats were running their caucuses and primaries back in 2020. They had the Iowa caucuses. Now, the argument in the Democratic Party was Iowa is too white of a state to represent the Democratic Party. They're right. And the fact they totally screwed up the voting calculation on the caucuses. It was a question who won it. Was it Pete Buttigieg or was it Bernie Sanders? And then Sanders went on to win Nevada and New Hampshire. Biden actually came in 5th place. People don't realize that. He actually came in 5th place in the New Hampshire primary. I think it was 4th or 5th in the Iowa caucuses. But when he came to South Carolina with the full support of Jim Clyburn, number 3 ranking Democrat at the time in the House, and Clyburn's basically, he controls South Carolina Democratic Party, overwhelming African-American support. Well, this is payback for Clyburn's support. And if you think about it, if you're in Biden's position, who won South Carolina convincingly with Clyburn's backing in 2020, we don't know for sure if the president's going to run for re-election. He's indicated he wants to. Is it possible he could get a challenge? Well, anytime you're sitting at a 42% approval rating or less, which is where the president is right now, you could get a challenger. And what better yet to ensure, if he wants the nomination, that he'll get it by having that first primary in South Carolina. I think it's a brilliant strategy on the Democrats' part. I mean, think about it. Is it a little outdated to use Iowa caucuses, particularly when that is not the base of the Democratic Party? Now, what happens after South Carolina? I think they're talking about holding South Carolina on like a Saturday. Then a couple days later on a Tuesday, Nevada and New Hampshire would have their primaries. Nevada out west, New Hampshire back east. Followed a week later by Georgia and then Michigan. Those would be the 5 states that would contest the early voting. Now, how many times here, think about this, what we've told you. What are the key states going to be in 2024? Pennsylvania, Michigan, early primary, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, early primary, Georgia, early primary. I mean, look, these are some of the states the Democrats are going to need to win if they hope to retain the presidency in 2024. So just from a purely analytical point of view and from a political point of view, what the Democratic Party is doing, embracing this change to South Carolina, is pretty smart. Look, I was trending Republican anyhow. So now, in the general election, are Democrats going to win South Carolina? No. But having said that, it's good politically because the base of the Democratic Party is African American women, liberals, African American men. In South Carolina, Biden carried that bloc and carried him to victory in 2020. So we may complain, we may not like their policies, and we disagree with them on a lot of stuff, but politically, they're on a pretty good roll right now. Now, speaking of that, Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel's the chairman right now. She is going to be challenged by Harmeet Dillon. She's an attorney, well-respected Republican. And you know what? I think it's time for a shakeup there. We've had 3 consecutive elections. 2018, again, after Trump won, didn't go so well for Republicans. They got blown out. 2020, we actually lost the presidency, but we picked up 14 seats in the House, but we lost the Senate. And now this year, 2022 midterms, again, picked up 10 seats or so in the House. We've got a 222 to 212 margin, but we've lost the Senate. Now, when you have a track record like that, generally, you'd want to have a shakeup. We'll see where this goes, but it appears that Harmeet Dillon is going to challenge Ronna McDaniel for the RNC leadership position. I'm not blaming Ronna McDaniel for those losses. I'm not going that stretch. I'm just pointing out the fact, when you've had 3 consecutive elections, it's time to make some adjustments here. Now, speaking of the Senate, again, how many times have we talked about early voting and the need for Republicans to get on board with that? Well, Raphael Warnock had a small lead in numerous polls, anywhere from 1 point, I saw one today, it's 4 points. Call it a 1 to 2 point lead. Again, bear in mind this time, there's no Libertarian opponent, so it's just those 2, Warnock and Walker. So somebody's going to get over 50%. Now, there have been 1,557,000 early votes already in Georgia. And just like we've talked about, 52% of those are Democratic votes. Not that mean all Democrats voted for Warnock, but most of them likely did. 39% are Republican votes. So, folks, we're going into Election Day down over 200,000 votes when Georgians go to the polls tomorrow. Now, I've seen weather reports saying that particularly in suburbs of Atlanta, it's supposed to be bad weather tomorrow. Here again, we hope Republicans will turn out. And if they do, Herschel's got a shot. And we've been saying this for weeks. This is a turnout election. Whoever turns out their base will win this election. Early on, it looks like Democrats have turned out their base. We'll see if Republicans can match it. Because, folks, Georgia was traditionally a red state. After the 2020 election, when neither party got the 50%, there was the same thing we're running into right now, where you had this runoff election. And that's when Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff, both Democrats, won their respective runoffs. And one thing about Warnock, he sort of joked about this, but it's true. And it actually caused me to laugh a little bit. He goes, this is the 5th time I've had an election for this Senate seat in 2 years. And I'm thinking, God, he's right. He had to win the primary, which he did. Then he ran up in the general election. Nobody got 50%. Then he ran in the runoff where he got 50% and won the seat. Now he won again this time, but less than 50%. So now he's in his 5th election. And he's only been in the Senate 2 years. So turnout. That's the key. And people will be voting in Georgia tomorrow. And then possibly at that point, if all the votes get counted properly, which we expect they will because Georgia runs their elections good, we expect we'll have a winner announced tomorrow night. Now, the Republicans did get some good news. Republican John Duarte flipped a California Central Valley U.S. House seat, winning just over 50% of the vote and basically taking the final seat that Republicans needed in the House. And with that seat, and I've included Lauren Boebert's seat, which has not officially been called because she won. Her opponent's not challenging it. State law mandates they recount in Colorado. No one's expecting any changes to it. So as it stands, likely the final results, 222 Republicans, 212 Democrats in the House of Representatives. And as we have stated time and time again, Kevin McCarthy needs to be elected Speaker of the House. We don't need the chaos from a floor fight. That's going to make us look really dumb if we do that. So hopefully, come January 3rd, Republicans will have coalesced around McCarthy, and we'll have that. Because if these polls are right tonight, and if Warnock wins that race, you're going to have a 51-49 Senate. Kamala Harris is no longer the key vote anymore. And Democrats, it's going to help them a lot on committees, getting judges appointed. There's a lot of things that happen positively for the Democrats if it's 51-49. Now, if the Republican base turns out and they vote en masse, Herschel Walker can still win this race. Now, let's move over to the presidential level a little bit. Man, I got to tell you something. Does it seem to you like Trump has become unhinged? I mean, he said some of the dumbest damn things I've ever heard a political candidate say over the weekend. Basically saying he should be returned to power and the Constitution's terminated. I can't condemn that comment any more forcefully than I'm doing now. That is a ridiculous statement. And that illustrates our point of why Donald Trump should not be anywhere near the nomination to this party. There is a flat out no way anyone that makes comments like that, and again, I'm a former Trump supporter. I voted for him twice. But you can't excuse dumb comments like that. It's ridiculous. People don't want to look back at the 2020 election. We're not going to take time doing it either. People want to look forward. What are you going to do for me in the future? They don't want to hear about all the garbage from the 2020 election. Yeah, there was problems with it. We understand that. We're not going to go back and relitigate that. We're in 2022 getting ready to flip the calendar to 2023. And for Trump to make a ridiculous statement like that, to me, it's disqualifying in itself. And he has no business being anywhere near our party's nominee. I know a lot of prominent Republicans disagree with that opinion. We had some of our guests on the show here have. But that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Again, I liked his policies, voted for him twice. but not this time. We have to be a party moving forward, not backward, and relitigating the 2020 election and calling the Constitution to be terminated. We don't need someone at the top of the ticket with that. That's ridiculous. All right, now, another political piece here that's got all the liberals just going crazy is Elon Musk is releasing these Hunter Biden suppression strategy, exposing, it was really obvious. Think back, folks, when this was going on. Brennan, Clapper, Panetta, CIA Director Mike Hayden, all basically saying, oh, no, this is a lie. This is Russian disinformation. Well, you know what? It wasn't Russian disinformation. Clapper and Brennan, two CIA directors. Mike Hayden was a CIA director, as was Leon Panetta. All basically saying, no, this Hunter Biden thing, Russian disinformation. No, it wasn't. And Musk released some of the information on this Hunter Biden story, how it was suppressed by Twitter and the mainstream media. And basically it exposed Brennan, Clapper, Panetta, and Mike Hayden as not being truthful on the subject. Panetta and Hayden, I can give a little bit of a pass to, but Brennan and Clapper were right at the heart of it. I mean, those two guys right there, I remember every Sunday, Brennan and Clapper, they'd roll them out on the Sunday morning shows. Same thing with Leon Panetta, too. Panetta's well respected, but boy, not on this one. Same thing with Mike Hayden, former CIA chief. But Brennan and Clapper were obvious political hacks for the Democrats, and it showed. More of this stuff is going to come out, folks. And every time it comes out, the mainstream media, and there's defenders, and the people on Twitter, the liberals that hate Musk, hate Trump, they're all going to come out. Difference is now they can't bury the story. But I'm going to go back to something here. The story's going to come out. Congress is going to investigate it. But at the end of the day, is it going to have any effect on most people's lives? No, it's not. It needs to be done, investigation. I get all that. But one thing we need to do when we take control of that House of Representatives is, and again, pardon the old saying, walk and chew gum. Yeah, we can have our investigations. We can have the Hunter Biden thing exposed. We can find out if there were direct payments to then candidate Biden, now President Biden. Well, that's important stuff. But we can't get blinded by that. That's one segment of the investigation arm of the House. But we have to focus on the issues that the American people want to see dealt with too. If we can do both of those things, then we'll have a good chance heading into 2024. But it cannot just turn into a partisan witch hunt. That cannot happen. I know you're saying, Mark, the Democrats did it with Trump. Paybacks are fair game. Yeah, we got to be better than that. Yes, we can have investigators investigate it, take a look at it, see what happened, get the suppression exposed. And again, this may not be the only thing that was suppressed. You're already seeing talk from Nick Sandmann, from the kid that got acquitted in the shootings up in Kenosha. More stuff's going to come out, folks, because Twitter was basically a liberal bastion of suppression. We knew it. We saw it. When the New York Post tried to put out that story, it was suppressed. We know it. And all that's going to come out. But my point is, got to walk, chew gum at the same time, focus on what the American people want us to deal with. Now, you've seen let me shift a little bit internationally here. You've seen the horrific stories out of Ukraine. How one day you're seeing Ukraine is doing great in the war. Next thing you're seeing the Kremlin's launching missiles. Well, there were blasts at 2 air bases in Russia that killed 3 people. These are bases where the Kremlin launches missile strikes on Ukraine. Look, Ukraine's been at a disadvantage, okay? Russia's lobbing in all these missiles. How would you feel? Missiles are coming in, and you really haven't had the weaponry to fight back. Word out is that the U.S. will not give the Ukrainians weapons to attack deep into Russia. But that's what's been happening. Now that may have changed. No one's saying where these weapons came from or even who fired them, but clearly bases where the Russians launched strikes, 3 people were killed. And the numbers that keep piling up on the Russian side are just horrific, the casualties. War's an ugly business, folks. And right now, the Ukrainians are defending their territory as winter's setting in, and you're hearing a lot of positive reports, but make no bones about it. You know, we saw a propaganda post of Putin driving a car over a bridge in Crimea that had been just blown up. This is going to be long, and it's going to continue to be hard. And the U.S. is going to continue supplying Ukraine with weapons, as is the Europeans and other countries. So this doesn't seem ending anytime soon. And then, of course, in China, where you had the COVID lockdown policies, it does appear that the leadership in China is backing off a little bit. That's an insane plan. You're not going to lock down a whole country over COVID. Didn't we learn that here? No, they're going to have to deal with it, but there are showing signs where this zero COVID policy may be easing up a little bit. So that, in theory, if that happens in China and China's economy starts to pick up, in theory, that should increase the demand for oil, which could cause prices to head up. A lot of moving pieces here, folks. There always is. This is nothing new. But we haven't seen this in a long time where you see a rapid increase in interest rates, which what we've seen, 475 basis point increases and an estimated 50 coming here in December. That's some pretty significant rate hikes. So we'll see how that plays out, throughout the economy. And then once again, congratulations again to the 4 teams that made the college football playoff. I know there's some Alabama fans that aren't happy, but you know what? This is only the second time in a long time that Alabama hadn't been in it. So, as we get closer, we'll give you our predictions on who's going to do really well as those games approach. But for now, college football seems to have done it right, and they're expanding to a 12-team playoff, not next year, but the following year. So excitement for all you college football fans out there. So again, we're going to keep an eye on things as they develop in the economy. We'll keep an eye on all these top stories. Tomorrow, if you're in Georgia, get out and vote. Herschel needs your help. We hope he wins. It's going to be tight, and whoever turns out their base will win that election. All right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks for viewing. Thanks for listening. We've got some nice guests coming up this week. We'll be back tomorrow cutting through the propaganda, and we'll cover all the top stories of the day for you. See you on Tuesday. Have a good evening.